Hi. So I've been thinking about this quite a bit lately. I also can't sleep, so that's even more time to think about it. I want to talk about what is essentially my wish list for The Elder Scrolls 6, all the things that I want to see in the game. To immediately put a downer on the entire video, I don't think that much of this will happen. I also don't think that The Elder Scrolls 6 will be a good game. I actually think it will be quite bad, worse than any of its predecessors. I feel that there's a small glimmer of hope with what seems to be the abject failure of Starfield. Maybe Bethesda will stop resting on their laurels and actually try to make an RPG for the first time in, oh god, 18 years? The last RPG that Bethesda made would be legal in October? Ah, shit. Starfield was such ass that it seems like the resounding sentiment surrounding that game is that it just made people want to play Skyrim again. I fear that that means that instead of trying to make a good game, Bethesda will just try to make Skyrim again. The main problem with that is that I think that Skyrim is a truly special game. It captured a space in the cultural zeitgeist that no other game will ever be able to capture. Doing that again would be like capturing lightning in a bottle twice over. I don't think that the Elder Scrolls 6 Topal Island or whatever will have the same reception as the Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim, even if the quality of the game is identical. Side note, I don't think that Topal Island will be in the Elder Scrolls 6, but I'd be pretty excited about it. I mean, Topal Island has, I don't know, pirates or something? That'd be pretty cool. You know what other Elder Scrolls game has pirates? Hell yeah, baby. But even if that does happen, the problem then would be that we have another game in the Elder Scrolls franchise that is the same quality as Skyrim. That is to say, a C plus tier game. I would be pretty disappointed with that because I think that C plus tier is the lowest this franchise has ever achieved with a mainline entry. All that is to say that, yeah, this isn't a video about predictions, what I think will happen. None of this shit will happen. But boy howdy, it sure would be cool if it did. Anyway, that's all of the negative stuff. Let us immerse ourselves in the real fantasy and escapism of imagining that The Elder Scrolls 6 will be good. So, the setting of The Elder Scrolls 6 is a thing of great importance and much debate. There are a lot of incredibly interesting places to go in Tamriel, a lot of which we haven't been to since Arena, which hardly counts. I'm going to go through the provinces of Tamriel and talk a little bit about each one in just a moment, but first, I need to talk about time. The first four mainline Elder Scrolls games each take place within a relatively short amount of time, all of them occurring during the reign of Uriel Septim VII toward the end of the Third Era. Skyrim, however, takes place 200 years later. I am going to assume that The Elder Scrolls 6 will take place after Skyrim chronologically. I'm also going to assume that Bethesda had a reason for such a large time jump, and that they wanted to continue a story that starts with Skyrim. Now to the provinces. Black Marsh is a land shrouded in mystery. The majority of it is inhospitable to anyone that's not one of the lizard folk. This would be a cool environmental hazard, but I feel like allowing the player character to too easily overcome it would really harm the world building. The place is supposed to be incredibly dangerous. Allowing a level 3 high elf to waltz through the mire and murk would be pretty lame from a narrative perspective. Black Marsh is in an interesting position politically. The Ansalil are an isolationist faction that has taken over the province and won independence from the Empire of Cyrodiil. Interestingly, they've also won some land from Morrowind, which might allow Bethesda to right the wrong of not having the chance to include mainland Morrowind back in that game. I think, though, that Black Marsh, as interesting as it is best served by remaining mysterious, so I don't think that the Elder Scrolls 6 should take place there. Cyrodiil is the heart of the Empire and the heart of Tamriel. All of the story of the Elder Scrolls revolves around the starry heartland of river and jungle, until, well, all the jungle and most of the river got removed. We were in Cyrodiil in the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion just 2 games ago, but I actually think it wouldn't be crazy to have it be the setting for 6. A lot has changed in Cyrodiil over the last 200 years, and it would be neat to see that. The Empire is incredibly weakened compared to the last time we saw its heart. Additionally, it's actually arguably a new empire, forged by Titus Mede I after the fall of the Septim dynasty, and the empire as a whole after the Oblivion Crisis. This empire never reclaimed good portions of land that the former empire had control of. Black Marsh was lost in the Oblivion Crisis, Morrowind was devastated and essentially abandoned by the Empire, the Somerset Isles fell to the Thalmor and their new Eldmeri Dominion, and eventually took Elsewhere and Valenwood with them, and Hammerfell was plagued by factional strife, as per the usual. Only High Rock and Skyrim remained good subjects of the Empire without having other problems. Furthermore, the Empire in the 175th year of the Fourth Era renounced their lordship over Hammerfell during the signing of the White Gold Concordat. This treaty with the Aldmeri Dominion also forced the Empire of Tamriel to outlaw the worship of Tiber Septim, the founder of the Empire. This should be considered a huge blow to the state religion of the Empire and its perceived legitimacy amongst her populace. I think that it would be interesting to see the Empire's heart in this situation. I think that there's a lot of good stories to tell here. Elsewhere is a popular choice amongst the, people like me. I mean furries, by the way, in case that wasn't obvious. Aside from the obvious benefit of incredible quantity and quality of pussy, Elsewhere would be a great place in which to set the Elder Scrolls 6. Elsewhere has, as a whole, been tricked into subjugating herself to the Aldmeri Dominion when the Thalmor took credit for bringing the moons back. Yeah, the moons disappeared for a couple of years. If you don't know, the Khajiit kinda need those, so that was quite the bane to Khajiiti society. I mean, there were also some coups involved, but you know. This puts the client kingdoms of Anaquina and Palatine in interesting positions. I could see a revolutionary plotline being the main thrust of the game, the Khajiit trying to take back their lands from the Aldmeri Dominion. The problem is that I feel like this is pretty obviously the route to go, and I don't see a lot of other particularly interesting opportunities. Of course, there could be some totally different plotline that is unrelated to the overarching storyline of the Aldmeri Dominion versus the Empire of Tamriel's struggle, but the same could be said for Anywhere. Maybe the main quest is totally unrelated, and the Independence plot is a different major quest line like the Stormcloak Rebellion in Skyrim. Hammerfell. Spoiler, Hammerfell is my choice for the Elder Scrolls 6, so I'll be talking about it plenty later. It is independent from the Empire, as mentioned previously, and was very much involved in the Great War. That's the major reason it's my choice. High Rock. Honestly, whatever. I don't think there's that much interesting about High Rock in the current timeline. Of course, there could be plenty of interesting things happening in High Rock, but there could be plenty of interesting things happening anywhere in Tamriel. Morrowind. The same as High Rock. It would be cool to see Morrowind in a total state of decay after the Oblivion Crisis, the Red Year, and the Accession War. I just don't see it being much involved with the overarching plotline. Skyrim. No. The Somerset Isles would be an interesting choice. I feel like they would sort of need to conclude the Aldmeri Dominion plotline with the Somerset Isles, though, and I don't think that it should end one game after it was introduced. Like I said earlier, Bethesda did a 200-year time jump for a reason, and I assume that this plotline is that reason. I don't necessarily think that it should have 4 games devoted to it, but probably more than 2. One advantage here, though, is that the Elder Scrolls 6 Somerset would continue the theme of the mainline games being in alphabetical order as well as chronological and numerical, so that would be cool. Valenwood would be in a similar spot as Elsewhere, without the significant amount of pussy, of course. Valenwood is also a client state of the Eldmeri Dominion, and could have a similar story. Valenwood, like Blackmarsh, should stay a bit mysterious, though, so I think that it's a worse choice than Elsewhere. That is each of the normal provinces. There are other provinces, though. What if Bethesda pulls a move that no one other than me is expecting, though? What if the Elder Scrolls 6 takes place on the lunar province of Secunda? That's right, bitches. The Elder Scrolls 6 will be a sci-fi game that takes place on the moon. Sure, contact with Tatterdemalion was presumably lost some point after the reign of Riemann and before the reign of Tiber Septim, but that just means that crazy shit is happening on the moon. The Elder Scrolls 6 will actually be Starfield 2. Anyway, that's not going to happen, but there are a few other geographic regions that I feel I should bring up as potential locations for the Elder Scrolls 6. Firstly, there's the Iliac Bay region. This is the same playable region as in the Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall, and comprises most of High Rock and a bit of Hammerfell. I think that this is a decent choice, mostly because Hammerfell is my actual choice for the setting. I think that you have some interesting piracy stuff to do there, what with Hammerfell being independent from the Empire, and High Rock still being a part. Secondly, I feel I should mention Akavir because it is so popular to speculate about. Hard no from me. It should remain mysterious even more so than Black Marsh. I would love some references to it, however. Thirdly, since I mentioned it earlier in the video, why not talk about Topal Island? Actually, it would kind of be a good place for the Elder Scrolls 6. In case you don't know, Topal Island is a relatively large island in the Topal Bay between Blackmarsh, Cyrodiil, and elsewhere. I actually think that a game with a maritime setting going between the coastlines of each of those provinces, with Topal Island acting as a center point for your adventure, would be pretty cool. As long as it's just the coastline, this would get around my opinion about not going to Black Marsh. It's mostly the interior of Black Marsh that should say mysterious, after all. There are other places we could go, but we're not. Like, we aren't going to Cathnake, Pyandonia, or Thras, or anything like that, and we're not having a game set in a particularly small area like Solstheim or just the Imperial City. The game is certainly going to have a large game world, so we're probably dealing with a province or large region. Alright, that's enough talking about where I don't actually want the game to be set. Let's actually talk about where I do want the Elder Scrolls 6 to be set: Hammerfell. Hammerfell is located in western Tamriel, bordered by High Rock to the north, Cyrodiil to the east, and the Abyssinian Sea to the south and west. A lot of interesting things have happened in Hammerfell recently. Much of the fighting during the Great War between the Eldmeri Dominion and the Empire of Tamriel took place in Hammerfell. Additionally, southern Hammerfell was the only territorial claim that the Eldmeri Dominion pressed in that war. Upon the signing of the White Gold Concordat, the Empire did agree to cede that land to the Dominion. However, the Red Guards utterly refused this outcome, so the Empire instead relinquished her claim to all of Hammerfell. The Red Guards then continued to fight the Dominion alone for 5 more bloody years, down to a stalemate. After this, Hammerfell is in a curious position. They are an independent kingdom with no allies. Their lands are besought by the Dominion, certainly, and likely Skyrim as well, especially if the Stormcloak Rebellion turns out to be successful. I don't think that the Empire is in a position to try taking back Hammerfell in the current point of the timeline, even if they want to. The Red Guards of Hammerfell have been plagued by factionalism for hundreds of years, if not longer. This would certainly be a theme of the game, perhaps down to having an outright civil war mirroring the Stormcloak Rebellion of Skyrim. While the book, a concise account of the Great War between the Empire and the Eldmeri Dominion by Legate Justianus Quintius, states that the crowns and forebears have set aside their differences, I would like to propose that, no, obviously they didn't. I don't think that the forebears doing one nice thing for the crowns during a time of foreign invasion is enough for these two factions to just all get along after hundreds of years of bitter rivalry and conflict. I think that Justianus Quintius saying that these two sides reconciled could be viewed in a couple different ways. Firstly, maybe he just meant that they were at peace between themselves for the remainder of the war, in which case his choice of wording was poor. Secondly, maybe he did mean that the Red Guards put aside their factionalist struggles entirely. If that's the case, then we can just chalk that up to him being a stupid Imperial that doesn't know the nuances of Red Guard politics. Remember that in-game books are written by in-universe authors who are more than capable of being wrong about things or making mistakes. It just isn't reasonable for these two groups to reconcile so easily. The Crowns and Forebears are not simply two groups with differences of opinion. They are two different factions with fundamentally different and mutually exclusive belief systems and priorities. No, they can't just all get along. I get that friendship is magic or whatever, but it's really hard to forge a friendship with the guy that is A, currently running at you with a sword, and B, fundamentally does not value the same things as you or envisions the same kind of future as you. It's not impossible, but that kind of reconciliation would be a hard-fought battle, and I don't think that the Great War would be enough. But this factionalism is an interesting point to jump off from. The Crowns and Forebears have their own versions of Redguard society, and I think that seeing that reflected in the Elder Scrolls 6 would be really cool. Seeing the Crowns engage in traditional practices and hearing them invoke the names of Diagna, Ruptka, Morwa, Tuwaka, and of course the Hunding would be a really cool juxtaposition with the Forebears and their Cyrodiilized culture. This factionalism is a cultural divide, not just a political one, and it has been so for hundreds of years. Those many years of cultural divide should just keep compounding as those cultures develop. Unlike Skyrim and the Stormcloak Rebellion, a game in Hammerfell really gives us the chance to witness two fundamentally different factions with fundamentally different cultures. In a way, Crown Hammerfell and Forebear Hammerfell would be like two different countries to explore in a single game, and I think that would be neat. There is also another group of people in Hammerfell that are neither Crown nor Forebear, and those are the Yoku. The Yoku show up in Redguard and are a cultural minority that seem to be even more conservative than the Crowns, some speaking exclusively in Yoku rather than Tamrielic. The problem I foresee with this is that the only reference we really have to these people is from Redguard, and that will have been over 500 years ago by the time the Elder Scrolls 6 occurs. I imagine that there's a good chance that the Yoku people will have been either totally eradicated or totally assimilated by now. If they aren't, though, then they would be super interesting to see. Now, let's talk about the land of Hammerfell itself. One of the most notable features of Hammerfell is the Great Alakir Desert. I think that the Alakir would provide a great environmental challenge to players. Going around it would cost time, which might be something that's important, but going through would be dangerous. I'll talk about it more in the mechanics section, but I'm a person who absolutely hates survival mechanics, so I don't want a food or water bar or anything like that, so I don't want that kind of challenge necessarily. I imagine the Alakir as being a large, relatively open space with nowhere to hide, nor towns to resupply in. The Dragontail Mountains to the northeast, near the border with Skyrim, could also provide a wonderful environment to explore. Tigonus in the Iliac Bay region is a swamp, which would be a nice, unique change in scenery. Likewise, the Banthan Jungle is a, well, jungle that would also provide a nice environmental challenge, for the thick vegetation would allow all sorts of ambush predators and visually interesting scenery. I might have let it slip a little bit throughout this video, but I kind of have a thing for pirates and the ocean. I think that it would be really interesting to have an Elder Scrolls game wherein sailing plays a big part. Hammerfell has islands in droves that could be explored, so I think that that would be really cool. Going to Stros Mackay would be really neat, as well as other islands like Kespar, Herne, and Sturk, as well as the Chain. I think it would be really, really cool if sailing was an option, especially if you could actually pilot the ship yourself. Of course, travel by boat would allow for naval combat to be an option, even if it comes down to exclusively boarding rather than using cannons or whatever. So pirates are on the table. Hell, maybe being a pirate is on the table as a character option. Hammerfell is also in an interesting position in the sense of ruins. Hammerfell has Dwemer ruins in the north and Iliad ruins in the east. I think that is unique and interesting. Dwemer ruins are always fun, and I really like the Iliad ruins in Oblivion. There are also presumably some old Redguard structures that are no longer in use. This would allow for an incredible diversity in architecture, giving the art team a lot of fun stuff to work with. I think that's enough about place, so let's talk a bit about time. Like I said earlier, I think that the Elder Scrolls 6 would take place after the events of Skyrim. Skyrim takes place in 4E 201. The White Gold Concordat was signed in 4E 175, and the Second Treaty of Stros Mackay, the treaty that enacted status quo antebellum between Hammerfell and the Altmerry Dominion, was signed in 4E 180. I think the timing here is a little bit tight. At the time of Skyrim, 21 years after the fighting between the Dominion and Hammerfell ended, many adults would have been born after, not having lived through it at all. Of course, they'll have dealt with the aftermath as a child, and have grown up in that environment, but they didn't experience it themselves. I think that there needs to be a large number of adults who fought in the Great War and or against the Dominion after the White Gold Concordat. And I mean adults, not the elderly. This is important because I want Hammerfell to still be run by the people who fought. We should see the people that fought still being the ones picking up the pieces of their shattered nation. I think that the Elder Scrolls 6 should take place in the year 205, 4 years after the start of Skyrim. I think that the dragon stuff should have been dealt with by the last Dragonborn, who is now wandering around Oblivion as a servant of Hermaeus Mora. But the Stormcloak Rebellion should still be ongoing, or have just finished, with Ulfric Stormcloak being crowned High King of the now independent Kingdom of Skyrim. I think that Bethesda needs to canonize the last Dragonborn's non-intervention in the Civil War, their only involvement being in mediating the Council of High Hrothgar to enforce a momentary ceasefire while they deal with Alduin the World Eater. I'm going to take a moment to explain why I think that's what should happen. Like I said, The Elder Scrolls 6 should take place shortly after Skyrim. That means that the outcome of the Stormcloak Rebellion needs to be noted upon. If Bethesda weren't willing to canonize the outcome yet, having the timeline so tight allows the conflict to be ongoing, letting them kick the can down the road to the next game. I think that the Thalmor are an interesting threat for the setting, and for narrative reasons, I think that they should come close to victory before being defeated. If the Stormcloak Rebellion has come to an end, I think that the narrative of the Elder Scrolls timeline is best served by the continuing fracture of the Empire, furthering the advancement of the Thalmor threat. So I believe that Ulfric Stormcloak should be crowned High King of Skyrim. As far as the involvement of the last Dragonborn in the Skyrim Civil War, I think it makes more sense for the Dragonborn to elect not to involve themselves in the conflict. I don't think that Bethesda should shy away from canonizing an outcome. I think that the last Dragonborn should take the Greybeard's lessons to heart and choose not to intervene in the affairs of men, doing only what they had to do to save Skyrim from the dragon threat. But I think that's enough about the setting, so on to the next section, the game mechanics. There are a bunch of changes that I would like to see in the Elder Scrolls 6 coming from the Elder Scrolls 5, but I'll talk about them in no particular order. The first thing that I would like to see is an overhaul of skills in the game. There should be more skills, and each one should have a greater impact on the game than ever before. Firstly, I want some skills back. Skyrim dropped too many of them, and I want more. In no particular order again, let's talk about them. I want mysticism back. Skyrim should not have dropped an entire school of magic. I'll talk about this a little bit later when I talk about the magic mechanics specifically, though. I'd like to see all the combat skills that were dropped in Oblivion and Skyrim return: spear, medium armor, unarmed, and unarmored. Additionally, the weapon skills should go back to being based on weapon type, rather than just how many hands those weapons require to wield. Weapon diversity should be an important part of character builds, and player choice should be a priority in a game like The Elder Scrolls. I want to go on a tangent about that for a minute, though. I feel like in modern RPGs, there's been a terrible conflation of player choice and player freedom. I don't think that these things are the same. When people advocate for more player choice, I don't think that means that they want the player to be able to do more things. That means they want the player's choices to matter more. Investing in the two-handed weapon skill allows you to use all sorts of two-handed weapons, thus increasing your options, player freedom. Choosing to specialize in axes exclusively, however, makes that decision have a weight to it, player choice. I think that the point I'm trying to make is best illustrated by Fallout 4. You can basically do whatever you want in that game at any time. The player has incredible freedom to do whatever they please. The downside to that is that your choices hardly matter at all. Oh, sure, you can deal 20% extra damage with rifles, but that doesn't matter. It just doesn't seem to make much of an impact at all unless you are perhaps on the highest difficulty. I'm not even sure about that. While you have plenty of freedom in Fallout 4, you don't really have meaningful choices to make at all. I think that both of these things, player choice and player freedom, are both important. Unfortunately, however, I think that these are two contradicting forces. Ultimately, a balance must be reached between allowing as many options as possible while maintaining the distinctions between those options. Anyway, I think that the choices you make with regards to your weapon skills should really matter. Hammerfell is a nation of warriors, so I think that all sorts of weaponry should be available, and plenty of people could teach you how to use them. I would also like to see a totally new weapon skill, that of throwing weapons. I want throwing weapons to be in the game, and I don't think that they should be lumped in with ranged weapons like the marksman skill in Morrowind. They should be governed by their own skill. Throwing weapons would give a nice ranged option for strength-based characters because yes, I want to add attributes back into the game, I'll get there in a minute, that don't want to invest too much in agility to use ranged weapons. The next skills I want to add are the athletics skills, and I mean all of them. Morrowind compressing them into one skill was a mistake, and I intend to undo that mistake. I want to see climbing, jumping, running, and swimming all as their own independent skills. I want my Khajiit archer to use her claws to scale a canyon's rock wall to get up to a ledge for a sneak attack on a caravan driver that I heard from a rumor would be moving something valuable through this area. I want swimming to be a genuinely valuable skill for my Argonian pirate character to invest in. I want to play a Dark Elf assassin that runs so quick they don't need to rely on stealth. I want to play a Nord that can jump good. These skills, especially climbing and swimming, would allow for an incredible diversity in level and world design. Imagine the secrets you could find only if you were good at climbing up walls and perceptive enough to notice the alcove above you. Imagine the shipwrecks you could dive for and loot with a high enough swimming skill. Being able to traverse the world in more interesting ways allows for more interesting world design, which is something that I think these games really benefit from. But in addition to adding more skills into the game, I also want those skills to be more impactful. In Skyrim, your skills don't really do much. A weapon skill increases weapon damage by 0.5% per skill level, at least according to the UESP. That means that you get 50% additional damage at level 100 from level 0. Firstly, you don't start at level 0 in any skill in Skyrim, so 50% additional damage is not the benefit you receive. Secondly, 50% seems kind of low for being a grand master of a chosen weapon skill, doesn't it? I just feel like it should matter more. Skill ratings should have a meaningful impact in and of themselves. Now, I don't think Bethesda would go back to having a chance to hit for weapon attacks, and I don't even really think that they should, so it can't be that, but there could be other things, techniques that unlock at certain skill thresholds, increase in attack speed or decreased recovery time between attacks, etc. There are options. Furthermore, I really think that the Elder Scrolls 6 should implement skill checks in dialogue, much like other RPGs. Imagine you go to a tavern and a suave mercenary notices you. He approaches and offers his services as a sellsword, only 100 gold per week, first week paid up front, of course. Say you have a high skill with swords. Perhaps your skill with swords allows you to notice that this guy definitively does not know how to use that sword buckled to his belt. Maybe you can point that out to him to get him to go away, maybe even extort some gold from him under threat of challenging him to a public duel, thus exposing his scam for all to see. I think that this would be a great improvement to dialogue in the Elder Scrolls 6. I don't think that speechcraft should be the only skill that matters in dialogue. Next up, I want to reintroduce attributes to the game. Cutting them from Skyrim was a mistake. I want to be able to point to my character sheet and say, yep, my character sure is smart. It's really as simple as that. Of course, having attributes would allow for there to be more mechanics that would be good. For example, much like adding skill checks into dialogue, there could also be attribute checks. High strength characters might get bonuses to intimidation, high intelligence characters might get better reactions from mage characters, etc. I don't really feel the need to elaborate on why I want to reintroduce attributes, so I'll instead elaborate a bit on how I'd re-implement them. The attributes should be the same ones that existed in the prior games, but I don't think the Elder Scrolls 6 should use the same style of progression of Morrowind and Oblivion. While I like the system that those games use, I know that that is partly because I am accustomed to it. I think that a simple point system like Arena, Daggerfall, and the Oblivion remaster each have used is perfectly serviceable. I also have a crazy alternate idea. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it, but I want to throw it out there anyway. What if the Elder Scrolls 6 used a system similar to Morrowind and Oblivion, but there was no player input? What if the game simply tracked the kinds of actions that the player took since the last level up and automatically assigned points amongst the attributes based on those actions upon level up? It seems like an interesting system to me, but it also seems like something that could easily sound way more interesting than it turns out to be once it gets made. Here's the thing that I'm actually not sure about: Skyrim's classless system. I kinda like it, but I kinda don't. Skyrim's classless system is pretty elegant in a game with no attributes, but I think it could work fine in a game with attributes. The main problem with the lack of class choices is, in my opinion, the lack of class advantages and disadvantages. Morrowind and Oblivion don't have class advantages, and I think that's a shame. There's something really fun about thieves having a 2% chance to critically hit per character level in Arena, and barbarians being immune to poison in Daggerfall. Another disadvantage to a classless system is simply the obstacle to increasing specific attributes in a reasonable way. There needs to be some other way to increase relevant attributes in a classless system. That's fine, it's just a whole, even if small, system that you would need to add to the game. I also dislike the removal of birth signs in Skyrim. I would add them back to the Elder Scrolls 6. I don't think that the standing stones are a good substitution. I don't really feel the need to elaborate on this one. So, I mentioned it in the settings section of the video, but I am not a fan of survival mechanics by and large. However, I do think it would be a disservice to the setting to not include them. Obviously, I would want them to be an optional mechanic, but here's how I would implement them. Water would exist in your inventory in the form of units. Each container of water would be able to hold a certain amount of units of water, and the weight of that container would update each time water was added or removed from it. Either that or the weights would be static and the containers wouldn't actually hold the water, they would just unlock the ability to carry water units. Anyway, rather than a thirst meter, your character would just automatically drink water at certain time intervals based on the environment that you're in. The hotter and drier the environment, the more often you have to drink. Every time you miss a drink, you'd get a stacking penalty until the point where you start dying from dehydration. You would remove these stacks by drinking, which you could do manually or automatically once you have a supply of water again, and importantly, letting time pass. I don't think that just drinking the water should be enough. You have to rest to recover from the dehydration. Much like thirst, I think that hunger also should not be represented by a food meter. Instead, I think that food should take up weight in your inventory and be eaten automatically when your character sleeps. This comes with stacking penalties, much like dehydration. I should say that I think there needs to be a settings menu for this automatic eating and drinking. You would need to have some control over it in the event that you need to ration your water or food. Have a menu where you can set your character to only drink every other time increment for water, and eat only after you sleep rather than before and after, etc. Sleep is the only need that I think should have a direct representation, a number, meter, or icon somewhere on the user interface or something. The amount you need to sleep should be based on your character's endurance and willpower. For each half an in-game hour you exceed your normal operating hours, you take a stacking penalty until your character collapses into unconsciousness regardless of their situation and surroundings, perhaps leading to your character never waking again. In town, your character should be considered to have access to water at all times, and all rooms at the inns should come with 2 meals as part of their costs. Because of my own distaste for survival mechanics, my proposals are based around streamlining them and pushing them into the background. That way, the fun of resource management is present, but the tedium of it is reduced. All you need to do is buy water and rations, and your character does the rest. When your character inevitably gets player housing, then you'd need to stock your home with food, but by then you probably have plenty of money to do so. When it comes to fast travel, I think it should probably exist in the Elder Scrolls 6, even if I think that these games are better if you don't use it. However, I have some changes that I'd like to make to it. Because I mentioned in the setting part of the video that the Alakir Desert should serve as an environmental obstacle, I think that needs to be represented in the fast travel system. When you open the map to initiate fast travel, you'll need to determine a route for your character to travel. You'll get a readout on how many rations and water units you'll need in order to travel safely, as well as an estimated time taken and time of arrival. I think that there should be some randomization to it as well, where a journey may take more or less time than your character thought it would. I think that this would make fast travel feel more interesting and not much more cumbersome. The last thing I want to say with reference to survival mechanics is that I think that survival should be a skill added to the game. It would influence the debuffs from unmet needs slightly, adjust the randomization in fast travel, and for those who are playing with the survival mechanics turned off, serve as the cooking skill. Skyrim added cooking, and I think that's neat, so I want to incorporate it into a skill, and that skill shouldn't be alchemy, so survival. Why not? Okay, magic is the really big one, isn't it? Magic throughout the series has undergone quite the series of changes. Across the 5 mainline games, there are at least 4 distinct Magic systems. I'm not even trying to exaggerate minor differences either, they really are all that different. And personally, I find the Magic system present in, and unique to, Skyrim the least interesting and least engaging of the 4. Something has to be done for the Elder Scrolls 6. The magic system in Arena and Daggerfall, the system in Morrowind, and the system in Oblivion each have interesting mechanics and quirks that allows us to go in a number of different ways. I think that we should work within some combination of these systems as a part of the series' identity rather than creating a whole new magic system for the Elder Scrolls 6. I'm going to go over these magic systems, some pros and cons of each, and talk about how we might be able to gel these systems together into something that seems interesting. I'll also speak briefly about the Skyrim magic system and why I don't like it. Before that, however, one brief aside. In addition to the changes in system, Magic has also undergone quite the downward trend in power level. I want to express that I don't simply want to say that because Magic is the most powerful in Arena, that that's the system that the Elder Scrolls 6 should go with. I do, however, think that the power level of Magic is incredibly important. I think that the power level of Magic is fundamental to the fantasy of Magic. What is the point, after all, of investing all of your character's power into the magical aspects if doing that gets you similar results to just using a sword? The fun of playing a magic character is that early game struggle contrasted with the late game feeling of power. Daggerfall and Morrowind do this very well, in my opinion. Magic characters in these games do feel weak in the beginning and feel very strong in the end game. Arena actually fails at this part of the fantasy, in my opinion, because magic is too powerful at the beginning of the game, so you pretty much immediately make it to the high power stage. In Arena and Daggerfall, the spells that you cast are scaled to your character level. For example, a basic damage spell will do some damage base, and then another amount of damage multiplied by your level. A paralysis spell will have some chance to succeed and some duration base, and then an additional chance to succeed and duration multiplied by your level. Additionally, the cost of your spells goes down based on your character's level. This is the difference between Arena and Daggerfall. In Arena, the price of spells goes down solely based on your character's level, whereas in Daggerfall, the price of spells goes down based on your character's skill level with the relevant magic skill. I think that this is really cool, and it's an easy way to give that power curve I was talking about earlier. Since all spells are based directly on your character's level, this allows a very easy way to make magic feel weaker at low levels and stronger at high levels. This also allows for something interesting. In a Skyrim-like game where enemies scale in power compared to your character level, scaling spells to your character level would allow for you to have a scaling damage source to compete with the enemies when weapons might not do that. I also think that the cost of the spell decreasing is a good mechanic. I would go with Daggerfall's approach of it being based off of skill level rather than character level. The cost of spells decreasing allows for higher level spells to simply cost a lot of spell points, or magicka in the case of the later games, rather than, like in Oblivion, the spells having a skill threshold requirement to even attempt to cast. Having your old spells cost less can let them serve as filler spells when your spell point reserves are running low, which is a nice additional bonus. However, I don't think that spells should scale in both of these ways. I think that one or the other should be picked. It just seems like a bit much to have spells get cheaper to cast and more effective as your character levels up. I think that decreasing spell costs is the better route to go. I really like having any spell be something you can attempt to cast at any level, so I'm not a fan of locking spells behind certain skill level requirements. Let my level 1 mage try to cast the super mega volcanic pyroblast. Let me use all of my spell points on that one spell if I want to. In Morrowind, spells do not scale to your level in any way. The effectiveness and cost of all spells is static. However, Morrowind implements the chance to fail in the casting of a spell. Now, Arena and Daggerfall had certain spell effects that only worked some percentage of the time, and enemies always had a chance to make a saving throw against any spell you cast at them, but you never failed to cast the spell in those games. In Morrowind, your chance to successfully cast the spell is based on your skill level in the relevant magic school. I think that this is a fine system on its own, but I don't think that it is what I want for The Elder Scrolls 6. I don't think that Bethesda would ever go back to a chance to fail casting the spell, and I don't think that they should either. It isn't really all that fun of a way to make magic suck at the lower levels, as I'd rather do something ineffective like cast a bad spell or use a weapon poorly than flip a coin to see if I do something at all. Oblivion is an interesting one. Oblivion has a statistic called spell effectiveness. This statistic affects the magnitude of every spell you cast. If, for example, your spell effectiveness is 90% and your spell does 10 damage, casting the spell would result in 9 damage. Spell effectiveness is based primarily on what kind of armor you are wearing and can only be 100% if you are fully unarmored. Spell effectiveness, according to the UESP, doesn't affect the duration of a spell unless that spell doesn't have a magnitude. I find that strange in theory, but I think that's actually pretty intuitive. 10 damage per second for 10 seconds at 90% effectiveness feels like it should be 9 damage per second for 10 seconds. The other way around feels wrong, and 9 damage for 9 seconds would be 81% effective, so that would just be mathematically wrong. I think that the spell effectiveness statistic is an incredible idea. I just wish that the armor you were wearing wasn't the only thing that affected it. I imagine that there could be all sorts of factors that increased or decreased spell effectiveness. Spells, potions, and being well fed or rested could all increase it, and being diseased, tired, hungry, over encumbered, or even being cursed in some way could all decrease it. I think that this is a great idea. Being able to scrounge around for ways to make my spells beyond 100% effectiveness would be something I would very much enjoy. I also like that the spell effectiveness mechanic provides a reason for magic based characters to go unarmored. In a game without class advantages and disadvantages, a topic I'll touch on soon, there, in my opinion, needs to be some way to enforce the traditional fantasy of the squishy unarmored mage. There needs to be a reason for the mage not to wear armor. In a realistic scenario, the person that can do magic is the most singularly valuable individual on a battlefield, so they need to be better protected than any archer, cavalry, or footman is. If wearing armor doesn't make it harder on a mage in some way, why don't they all wear heavy armor? Of course, magic characters in the Elder Scrolls 6 should be able to wear armor. That's part of the franchise, but there needs to be some incentive not to do so, and I think that the spell effectiveness mechanic is a great, simple, and intuitive way to do it. I think that if I had a say, this mechanic would make a return in The Elder Scrolls 6. I'm going to take a bit of time to also talk about Skyrim's magic system and why I don't like it. Mostly, I don't like the Bioshock style left hand right hand system. I don't think there's a problem with it in an objective sense, I just don't like it personally. In Arena, Daggerfall, and Oblivion, you can just cast spells with your weapon out. In Morrowind, you just need to press a convenient button to put your weapons away and bring out your magic hands. I really like these systems over putting a spell in one of your hands. I do prefer Morrowind, however, because I find the fantasy of having magical gestures, what some might call somatic spell components, be an important part of magic in a fantasy game. Also, spells are really expensive in Skyrim, spell point wise. Am I the only one that feels that way? I mean, you essentially need to invest perk points into the perks that have the magicka cost of spells of certain ranks. This essentially makes it feel as though the spells are gated by skill levels, even though they technically are not. But really, the actual systems of the magic in Skyrim are not my main problems with the magic in Skyrim. My main problem with magic in Skyrim is that it's shit and boring. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Next, I want to talk about something that tends to be a little bit controversial: spell point regeneration. In Arena, Daggerfall, and Morrowind, your spell points don't regenerate until you take time to sleep. In Oblivion and Skyrim, however, your spell points slowly regenerate over time. I'm just gonna say it. Spell points shouldn't regenerate over time. I think that spell point regeneration in games like those of the Elder Scrolls series is a bad choice. Let's talk about why. Firstly, spell point regeneration means that you cast more spells. That might sound like a good thing, but it isn't. Casting more spells means that almost by necessity, each spell you cast is less impactful than it would otherwise be. Remember that the game devs don't go out of their way to make things overpowered, so they're gonna make sure that spells are balanced, even if not perfectly, around spell point regeneration. I think that casting spells should feel big. You are warping reality to your will. It should have some real heft to it. Secondly, I think that a magic character that has run out of spell points should be in a panic state. If casting spells is your whole deal and you are out of the resources you need to do your whole deal, you should be worried. I think that knowing that you can just wait out a situation and let your spell points regenerate is a real killer to the fantasy. Thirdly, I think that having a single spell point pool to work with lends itself to the wizard archetypal fantasy of meticulously preparing for a given encounter. When the wizard has preparation, they are unbeatable. I think that's an important fantasy to cater to. But when your plan involves around waiting for your spell points to regenerate, then that just tanks the fantasy, in my opinion. Finally, it goes back to game balance. I personally believe that magic should be powerful. Not necessarily overpowered, but definitely powerful. In fact, I think that a mage with spell points should be incredibly difficult for the game to challenge. The flip side of that is that I think that a mage without spell points should be very easy for the game to challenge. The dynamic of the game, then, should be various ways in which the game stresses your spell points. Ghosts that damage spell points, enemies with spell absorption or spell reflection, and low level enemies coming at you from multiple directions are all ways to put stressors on your spell point pool, and this is the angle that I think that the Elder Scrolls 6 should go in. Let's talk about the magic in Skyrim being shit and boring. I said I would talk about that a bit earlier. So, why do I say that? Well, it largely comes down to what the spells in Skyrim can do, the spell effects available. There aren't a lot of them, and I would like more. For example, there aren't any mobility spell effects, things like levitation, climbing, fortify, speed, jump, teleportation, water walking, etc. There aren't any spells that open locks outside of a Creation Club edition, which I don't count as being legitimate. Likewise, there aren't any absorb health spells outside of the Creation Club editions, and being a vampire, and that's just lame. Absorb health is really cool. And here's another thing, there's no cure disease spell in Skyrim. How? What do you mean? Why not? How is the cure disease spell a technology that has been lost in the last 200 years? How does this occur? I get that techniques might be lost in the downfall of the Empire, but really? Is this not something that people considered to be important enough to take great care not to lose? You know, the ability to cure diseases? Now that's not important. What the actual fuck? The ability to magically cure disease is probably the most useful spell in fiction. All of the settings. Do you know how many people die of diseases? It's a lot. I don't care if, for mechanical reasons, the Cure Disease spell isn't useful in the game Skyrim. The functionality is there. Why not give the players a spell to do it? Even if no one wants it, let the spell tome sit in Farengar's inventory. Just so we don't have a setting where people forgot the most important spell they could ever learn. Phew, anyway. Additionally, spellmaking needs to make a return. It was a real shame in Oblivion when spellmaking was locked behind the DLC home or getting into the Arcane University. While I actually kind of respect the world building of the Mages Guild not allowing people who haven't made it to the center of the organization to make their own spells, it isn't very fun from a gameplay perspective, and obviously the total removal of the system in Skyrim is frankly unacceptable. So let's wrap up and summarize all of my ideas for magic in the Elder Scrolls 6. There are 6 schools of magic and a skill that goes along with each. The magic skill affects the cost of relevant spells. Each spell you cast is subject to your spell effectiveness, a statistic that is determined primarily but not exclusively by the equipment you are wearing and is displayed as a percentage. Magic is tuned to be powerful, as the game will stress your spell point pool, which doesn't regenerate unless you take time to rest, which will be the primary method by which magic is balanced. A diversity of spell effects are available, as is spell making, to mix and match them as you please. Spells are cast at the press of a button whether your weapons are out or not, much like in Oblivion. The combat in Skyrim is something that really needs to be tweaked. I can't explain it, but the combat in that game is just not fun. You really do just stand there and click and/or click and hold. I know that that might sound rich coming from a rat that really enjoys Morrowind, but I genuinely think that combat is more fun in that game. Firstly, in Morrowind you have multiple attack types to use. Sure, the attack types are underbaked and only give you different damage ranges rather than having differing effects, but at least there's something there. Technically, that exists in Skyrim as well, but only with power attacks. I really don't like power attacks, they just don't feel good to me personally. Secondly, in Morrowind, combat is over pretty quickly unless you're doing something weird or you're very unskilled in hand-to-hand specifically. That means that even if the combat isn't the most engaging mechanically, you don't have to do it for very long. In Skyrim, every combat encounter with more than a random single wolf takes an eternity. Speaking of, if there are any single wolves in the audience, please hit me up. Every enemy in Skyrim just sits there holding block and waiting. I just don't like it, it makes me sad. I'm going to be honest though, I don't really know what to do about this, at least not in specific. A multitude of attack types like in Morrowind would be fun, but they need to do something other than just give you a different damage range based on your weapon. I would suggest that increasing levels of your weapon skills would unlock a few additional bonuses for each weapon type and attack type. Maybe, for example, once you hit around 50 or 60 in the spear skill, a swiping attack, which spears aren't usually good at, will be transformed into an attempt to sweep the legs of your opponent, maybe knocking them down. This would give utility to weapons that are only really good at one attack type, like spears, and generally give you something to do in combat other than mindlessly pressing the attack button. Perhaps different attack types should have different hitboxes on a weapon. A thrusting attack, for example, should have a really narrow hitbox, but it compensates by having a longer reach. The hitbox on a spear's swiping attack would be huge, but it would probably deal pretty low damage unless it were a halberd. I feel like this alone would add some sort of depth to the combat system, as long as these changes were easy enough for the player to both detect and internalize. An addition I would like to see in the Elder Scrolls 6 is actually different damage types for weapons and relevant defensive statistics on armor. This is why I referenced the idea of a swiping attack rather than a slashing attack as it would have been called in Morrowind. I think that this simple bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage system would be sufficient. It works well in all sorts of RPGs, and I don't see why the Elder Scrolls 6 would be an exception. I like the ability for different armors to be more resistant or more vulnerable to different types of weapon attacks. It's a fun thing, both narratively and mechanically, and shouldn't be too difficult a system to implement. Speaking of armor, please bring back all the armor slots. I want pauldrons, damn it. I really don't like the simplification that Oblivion made to the armor system, taking Morrowind's, 16 down to a whopping 8 in Oblivion and Skyrim down to 7. So, technically in Skyrim, there are a small paw full of items that use either the hair slot or the head slot, so you can actually wear a couple of items on your head, which technically brings it up to 2 headpieces, chest and legs, gloves, boots, 2 rings, and an amulet, which is 8 pieces, but that's weird and janky. I don't necessarily think that it is reasonable to have all 16 armor slots of Morrowind. We can pare that down a little bit, but I think that the Elder Scrolls 6 should have most of the slots Morrowind had, namely head, chest, legs, boots, gloves, pauldrons, shirt, pants, belt, skirt, and robes, as well as 2 ring slots and an amulet slot. I also think that there should be a new slot added to the game, and that is earrings. Given that this is taking place in Hammerfell, been a while since I mentioned that, hasn't it? We know that a lot of Redguards have pierced ears. Of note, Cyrus the Restless, player character in Redguard. I think it would be a fun bit of world building to have earrings, both magical and mundane, be an equipable item in the Elder Scrolls 6. Furthermore, I think that the beast races should once again be restricted in their armor capabilities. In Morrowind, the Argonians and Khajiit couldn't use footwear or closed-face helmets. I like that. It makes sense. This should be a feature in the Elder Scrolls 6. Whether Argonians can or can't wear footwear is a matter of personal preference, I think, as they are depicted as being plantigrade, that is to say they walk on the whole of their feet, in all of the games except for Morrowind. But I like the digitigrade, walking only on their toes, look in Morrowind a lot. But I can agree that maybe Argonians should be able to wear footwear. They shouldn't wear closed-face helms, though. Let them be snouty. I like snoots. The Khajiit, on the other paw, are something about which I, unsurprisingly, have many opinions. Anyone who knows the history of the Elder Scrolls games knows that the Khajiit have undergone quite the variety in appearance over the games. This is, unlike the appearance of Argonians being changed quite a bit as well, actually blessed with an in-universe explanation. The Khajiit are bound by the lunar lattice, the motions of the moons. The lunar lattice protects the world of Nirn from the horrors that await beyond it, but also blesses the Khajiit with their panoply of feline forms. These different forms are known as fur stalks, and there are at least 17 of them. The Pocket Guide First Edition says that there are over 20 documented fur stalks, but we only know of 17. The fur stalk that a Khajiit takes is determined by the state of the moons at their birth. All Khajiit kittens are born looking more or less similar, but quickly take on a more identifiable appearance in the weeks after their birth. As I said, there are 17 known Khajiit fur stalks. If Elsewhere were my choice of setting, then I would demand that 16 of them be playable. One of the fur stalks is the Main, which is a special role in Khajiit society as well as a fur stalk, so that one shouldn't be playable. I really don't want to play as the Main in an Elsewhere game. That would be much too Chosen One-y for me. However, I would not ask for all 16 of those fur stalks to be playable in the Elder Scrolls 6. Instead, I would humbly request 3 of them. In Daggerfall, the playable Khajiit are the Omus Rot, a fur stalk that is plantigrade and otherwise largely human-looking, aside from their very short fur, which seems to me to be more like peach fuzz, and a tail which is thicker at the base and tapers down to a point. I think this tapering is more noticeable due to just how short the fur is. In Oblivion and Skyrim, the playable Khajiit are the Cathay, a fur stalk that is plantigrade, like the Omus Rot, but much more feline. They are covered in fur, their heads are very feline, short snout and ears included, and they have a tail that remains largely uniform in thickness, much like that of a leopard. In Morrowind, the playable Khajiit are the Suthe Rot, a fur stalk that is digitigrade and very feline in their countenance. Their snouts are longer than those of the Cathay, and their ears are longer. Their tails are much like those of the Cathay, being largely uniform in thickness. I would want all 3 of these fur stalks to be playable options in the Elder Scrolls 6. It's just too perfect a run of the full gamut of cute kitty characters, from the human with a cute tail of the Omus Rot to the full-on anthro of the Suthe Rot. I think that they should each essentially function as their own race with their own statistical bonuses and malices. The Omus Rot should be able to equip themselves just like human characters. The Cathay should be able to equip themselves like humans, with the exception of the headpiece being restricted to closed-faced or open-topped pieces, and the Suthe Rot should be unable to use boots as well as the headpiece restrictions. I do have an idea for the Cathay and Suthe Rot, though. Recall that I want earrings to be an equipable item in the Elder Scrolls 6. Well, these guys sure have ears, don't they? It sure would be a shame to not let them be useful. I would, as an exchange for not being able to wear many headpieces, give these 2 fur stalks access to a unique additional earring slot that no other race has access to. I think that this is a fun trade-off. You would get less armor, but more enchanted items. Earlier, I mentioned that I would be talking about class advantages a little bit later, and later is now. Class advantages and class disadvantages only existed in Arena and Daggerfall. Morrowind abandoned them, and I have very mixed feelings about this. On the one paw, I appreciate the more open direction that Morrowind took with its character progression. The fact that no class has an advantage in the amount of hit points or spell points they get allows for characters to do odd, off-class things if they want to invest the attribute points into doing so. On the other paw, I really like class advantages. There's just something really fun about the fact that, yes, mages have less hit points than barbarians. That's just how it works. I like that monks get to avoid all damage on successful saving throws rather than just half of it in Arena. I like that sorcerers get 3 times their intelligence in spell points while mages only get double. I am of the opinion that while I enjoy the classless nature of Skyrim, I think that the Elder Scrolls franchise should stick with having character classes, but that doesn't really answer the question of whether the Elder Scrolls 6 should go with Arena and Daggerfall's class system or with Morrowind and Oblivion's class system. I really can't decide, so what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Here's a proposal for a new mechanic. Now, Skyrim had the Thuum, a special power that the player character had access to. Shouts in Skyrim weren't spells, and they didn't take a resource other than the recharge time that they had. Additionally, Starfield also had a special power system that is, from what I recall, exactly a reskinned version of the Skyrim shouts. I don't think that there needs to be a special powers system in the Elder Scrolls 6, but I feel like Bethesda would add one, so why not put my idea out there? Well, we're in luck, because Hammerfell actually has a relevant special power that we could have in the Elder Scrolls 6. That is the Shehai, the spirit sword, called forth by the sword singers of old Yokuda. The Way of the Sword is a philosophy of the Redguard people. This is largely simply that, a philosophical enterprise, but some who practice it can learn mystical techniques. In the time of the Fourth Era, however, this art is lost. I'm against the plot of the Elder Scrolls 6 being too heavy-handed with any sort of chosen one destiny or prophecy as Skyrim was, at least in my opinion. So I really don't want your character rediscovering the way of the spirit sword to become some destiny or prophecy or anything like that. Or if it is, at least give it the guise of plausible deniability that the main quest of Morrowind has. I suppose a problem with this super special power is that it isn't necessarily very useful for thief or mage type characters. The Way of the Spirit Sword is pretty focused on, swords. Of course, there could be techniques that those types of characters could use, but I imagine that it would have to be primarily focused on benefiting fighter type characters. However, maybe that's fine. Magic characters, if all my dreams come true, wouldn't really need the utility from a super special power. They have magic at their disposal. Thief type characters, though, would probably feel left out. I would propose that there be different categories of sword singing powers, and that they would act kind of like skills. So, say offensive, defensive, and balanced categories. Each category would have different powers, and each power would have a certain rank associated with it. In order to unlock, say, rank 3 defensive techniques, you would have to have learned and mastered a certain number of rank 2 defensive techniques, which in turn require you to have learned and mastered a number of rank 1 defensive techniques. I would propose that these techniques all scale based on your total number of techniques known. Ideally, none of them would ever be useless, as a true master knows when to use advanced techniques, but also when the simple techniques will be sufficient. Alright, let's talk about crafting. Let's start with cooking, since I've mentioned it. Skyrim added cooking, and I think that's great. I would tie it to the aforementioned survival skill, though. It's too small to be its own skill, I think, but really should be governed by something, I feel. I also think that recipes are something that you should have to unlock, rather than simply having all of them at your disposal from out the gate. You could do this by experimentation, like with alchemy, by finding recipes in the game world, and or simply by leveling up your survival skill. Alchemy in Skyrim is fine. I like it. It's really not that much different in systems than the prior games. It's less exploitable, but that's okay. I don't mind the inability to carry alchemy equipment with you in Skyrim as you can in Morrowind and Oblivion. Being unable to make potions on the fly makes the preparation stage in towns before going out into adventure more important, which is something I personally value. Enchanting is the system in Skyrim that I have a problem with. Again, I don't mind the inability to do it out in the field as you can in Morrowind. My main problem is the inability to enchant certain items with certain magical effects. I mean, why can't I enchant my sword with resist frost, or my shield with fortify stamina, or my chest piece with fortify carry weight? I mean, come on. I don't know if you've ever worn backpacks before, but most people who have worn backpacks know that some of them are better than others when it comes to weight distribution. The bad backpacks will put all of the weight on your shoulders exclusively, whereas better packs will distribute that weight across your torso, making it a lot easier to carry. Anyway, all that is to say that the inability to enchant chest pieces with extra carry weight is just nonsensical, frankly. I also really don't like the inability for magical items to cast spells on use. I think that they should. Why take that out of the game? I think that non-spellcaster characters should have access to magic items that cast spells on command, rather than only passively or when striking an enemy. So, yeah, bring back cast on use items and lift all the restrictions on what enchantments can go on what items. I don't care if it's useless to have a bow that increases my spear skill while I'm using the bow. Let me do it if I want to. That's really all I have to say on this subject, I think. Speaking of being finished, I think I'm finished with the mechanics section of this video. We've covered a lot of ground here. I really don't think that I'm asking for that much. It might seem like it since this section has been so long, but most of what I've asked for in this section has been a return to what prior games have done. If Bethesda has done it before, then they can do it again, presumably. Anyway, on to the next section, everything else. I want to start this section by talking about enemy factions in the game. There are a lot of options for enemy factions, depending on what exactly turns out to be happening in the setting. I'm not going to go so in-depth as to determine the main story of this hypothetical game, so a lot of this is going to be even less specific than the parts before, if you can handle that. Hell, if I can handle that. The most obvious enemy faction is bandits, as they essentially act as mindless humanoid enemies. They can crop up anywhere and for any number of reasons. We have a nice bonus being in Hammerfell, though, and that is that pirates can act as an additional alternate bandit faction. Though I would love a joinable pirate faction, most pirates would probably be hostile by default. A small aside, I've always found it a bit weird that bandits have gold on them when they're out banditing. Presumably, bandits wouldn't keep their money on them, they would keep it at the place they're hiding out in. I think that in Hammerfell, however, we have a nice workaround to this. Bandits might not keep their gold on them, but they might still be wearing earrings, which you could sell for money. It all goes full circle, baby. You thought the earring thing was just me liking earrings. Well, I mean, it is, but there are other reasons for it, too. I would really like the bandits to be fleshed out. I don't want them to just serve as mindless humanoid enemies, though I don't necessarily mind if they are. I'd like for them to be arranged into different groups, each with their own specific goals and guidelines. Maybe some are slavers and kill everyone that tries to fight back, maybe others only steal from merchants and try to keep violence to a minimum. I feel like this would just give a bit more life to the world, even if nothing in specific comes of it, like quests or player interactions with NPCs. Other factions really depend on the political state of affairs. Thalmor agents and raiding Nords also are potential factions. Remember that I call for the Skyrim Civil War to either remain ongoing or be resolved with an independent Skyrim. Skyrim and Hammerfell have some history, and High King Ulfric Stormcloak might have some wrongs to right. The Thalmor are presumably still bound by the Second Treaty of Stros M'Kai and won't have a large presence in Hammerfell, but the terms of that treaty aren't stated in specific. Maybe it only had terms on the order of 10 or 20 years, we don't know. It could well be the case that they are now able to operate more freely in the province. One potential enemy faction that I'd like to bring up are the slug folk of Thras, the Slowed. Hammerfell is not the main target of slowed slave raids, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a presence. Thras is located in the Sea of Pearls, southwest of Hammerfell and west of the Somerset Isles. This means that Thras, and thus the Slugfolk, is fairly close to Hammerfell, but that doesn't even matter all that much, as the Slowed have been known to travel all the way to Tear in Morrowind to purchase slaves. The Slowed have only appeared in ESO and, of course, Redguard. That means that, as far as single-player games, it's been since the last millennium that we have seen them. Unlike something like Akavir or Middle Argonia, I think that some of the mysteries of the Slowed should be elucidated in the Elder Scrolls 6. Necromancy isn't really big in Hammerfell like it is in the other provinces, as worship of Arkay is incredibly strong, so the Slowed would be a great source of that enemy type, as they are well known for their propensity for that most ancient of magical arts. Not only would the Slowed provide a source for undead enemies, they would also serve as good boss enemies. The Slowed are universally talented mages, and their physical bulk lends well to a large hit point bar. Having a big, tanky, and magically powerful enemy archetype would be a pretty good category of boss enemies, and the stories you can tell with Slowed antagonists are many. The Slowed are sociopathic necromancer slavers. What more need I say? Hammerfell has a history with goblins. I think that in the eastern portions of Hammerfell, there are probably groups of goblins that are quite the nuisance. In Oblivion, the goblins were all organized into different groups that had their own conflicts with one another. It's actually quite the cool mechanic that isn't at all obvious to the player, but the different goblin groups are all at war with each other and you can find them fighting. I think this is a fantastic system to lift directly from Oblivion and drop into the Elder Scrolls 6. Now, I think that the goblins would probably be relegated to Eastern Hammerfell, as I said. I don't think they would have much of a presence near large cities like Hegathay or Sentinel, and I don't think they would be able to push back across the Alakir since the goblins really had their asses handed to them when the warrior wave came ashore. As far as other enemies goes, I'd like to see the return of giant scorpions from Daggerfall. They're not unique to Hammerfell in that game, but they're a bit more common than in High Rock. Giant scorpions are pretty scary enemies in that game. They're pretty tough, deal a decent amount of damage, and most terrifyingly, can deliver a paralyzing venom with their stinger. If you don't have a way to cure your paralysis after being stung by a giant scorpion in Daggerfall, you're almost certainly dead. I think that's a great threat. Preparation is important, so forcing the players to stock up on anti-venom is a direction I think the game should go in. Other returning enemies from Daggerfall would be giants, which would be generically large, tanky enemies. Nymphs would also be a welcome enemy, as in Daggerfall they deal damage to you in health points and in fatigue damage. I think that's cool and a fun way to challenge martial characters. I would also like to see the return of centaurs. Even if they're not particularly powerful enemies, their speed could prove to be what puts the final nail in the coffin of a player who feels the need to retreat from combat. Since all of these enemies are intelligent, I would also hope to see each of them in non-hostile roles as well. I would greatly appreciate seeing parallel societies in the Elder Scrolls 6, and these humanoid races would be a great opportunity to flesh them out. In Daggerfall, these enemies are each governed by a language skill by which you can render them non-hostile. I don't think that the language skill idea as implemented in that game would fit all that well into a modern RPG, so I would like some other way of getting around these folks. I think that enemy design is important. Ultimately, combat really is the main focus of the Elder Scrolls franchise, at least as far as game mechanics goes. Whether it's defeating enemies or avoiding them, they will end up being the main thrust of the game. Each enemy should have strengths and weaknesses in both of those regards. In combat, some enemies will be powerful but slow. Out of combat, some enemies will be well sighted but hard of hearing. It's the challenges in avoiding combat that I'm really interested in. Perhaps this should have been part of the mechanic section, but it's my video, I'm putting it here. I think that stealth is really boring if it's too easy, so each enemy should have ways of detecting stealthy characters. For example, undead should be able to see invisible characters, and intelligent characters might pick up sand or dust to try and throw at and cover invisible characters. Perhaps some enemies have a good sense of smell. But of course, with all of these counters to stealth come counters to the counters. Even if you're invisible, you still need to be quiet, which could be achieved by skill in stealth, of course, but also either your equipment or through magical means. And for enemies with a sense of smell, I don't know, maybe take a bath or something? Just a suggestion. The next little section is about the general tone of the game, and I want to start with what I think is the most important part. One of the things that's almost universally praised about Morrowind is the utter feeling of foreignness that Vardenfell embodies. The world in Morrowind feels so very alien to anything else. You have totally normal trees cohabitating with mushrooms the size of trees, strange bipedal lizard creatures, and a species of insect that people learn to live with and mine their eggs as a form of animal husbandry. Vardenfell is a world unlike any other, and I love it. I want The Elder Scrolls 6 to give off a similar feeling. Hammerfell is populated by the Redguards, who came from across the sea a few thousand years ago. They brought with them their own language, culture, and religion that is totally foreign to Tamriel. Now, yes, much of this has been assimilated into Imperial culture, but the Crowns hold strongly to their traditions. I want Hammerfell and the Redguards as a whole to really shine as something interesting and foreign. This might be a bit of a controversial take, but I would really like the tone of The Elder Scrolls 6 to be mature. I want the game to be made for adults. I feel like so many games these days are aimed at all audiences, but I think that there's something that the game would gain by including adult and dark subject matters. Imagine the emotional impact of walking around the first big city you get to in The Elder Scrolls 6, say Rihad, and you come across a widow who has tragically come to the conclusion that the best way to feed her children is to sell her body, or even worse, she's being pressured to do so by a cruel pimp. Imagine the quest that you could do to free the prostitutes from their cruel master, or, if you're playing a certain kind of character, get in on that business. I think that the game would really benefit from this kind of gritty realism in a war torn nation. I want it to be really explicit too. I want the game to kind of bludgeon you with it. Tactfully, of course. Show, don't tell. I want you to see the suffering of these people rather than just being told about it. In Skyrim, the whole province is being plagued by dragons, vampires, and a civil war, but do we really see it? I mean, we see the dragons or vampires attack a town, and all the people just run inside while the guards just handle it. Sometimes an unnamed guard will die and respawn a week later, or whatever. A true tragedy. I don't know how Skyrim will ever recover from this. The big problem with this desire is that, to be totally honest, grim settings are kind of hard to do right. It's very easy to lay it on too thick and end up with a Warhammer 40,000 parody. While something like 40k can do a dark and grim, some might say grimdark, setting genuinely, it's very easy for the line to be crossed into insipid edginess, and even 40k does cross that line sometimes. The key is to have things be grim for realistic reasons, rather than just being grim because the setting is supposed to be grim. The last thing that I want to talk about is the world design of the game. I think that the world is the thing that most people value the most in the recent Elder Scrolls games. I say recent, I mean the ones that have come out this millennium. I would very much like the world of the Elder Scrolls 6 to be significantly larger than that of Skyrim, and I mean in all dimensions. With the reintroduction of the climbing skill and potentially levitation magic as well, I think that significant verticality would really aid the game. The introduction of new tools to traverse environments requires the ability to make use of those tools well. I think that having part of the exploration phase of the game being the traversal of difficult terrain would be very fun. This goes back to player choice and consequences. If you decide to not invest in something like climbing or levitation magic, you are stuck on the straight and narrow path. That's fine. The straight and narrow path is cool sometimes, but it's really cool when that's only one of many options. Like verticality, I also want the game world to stretch out quite a ways. Starfield tried to explore the concept of empty space, which is something that I actually respect quite a bit. The problem with Starfield is that there was no reason to actually engage with that empty space at all. I think that it makes a lot of sense to have vast stretches of mostly empty space between points of interest. After all, I'm advocating for the Alakir being an environmental obstacle. By all rights, that should largely be open space. The problem with obstacles is that there needs to not just be ways to overcome them, but a reason to overcome them. Even if an obstacle can clearly be overcome, there needs to be a reason to actually bother doing it in order for the obstacle to serve a function in the game. In my conception of the Elder Scrolls 6, the empty space would serve as an obstacle to reaching points of interest that are interspersed throughout it. These could be dungeons, towns, quest locations, etc. It doesn't really matter what they are so long as they are, well, interesting. Now, that's not to say that the empty space should be totally empty. There should be little nooks and crannies scattered about that have something interesting in them, environmental storytelling pieces, little loot piles, collectibles, what have you. Of course, the primary thing that I would want to fill this empty space is puzzles in navigation and traversal. As I've mentioned, I want the athletic skills that I'm reintroducing to be useful and open up possibilities. This empty space shouldn't just be a flat field with nothing in it. There should be mountains, canyons, rivers, thick jungles, and swamps. Of course, some of the Alakir would be a flat field with nothing in it, and that in and of itself should be unusual. That's also its own kind of challenge. A character that relies on stealth should feel totally out of their element in that kind of environment, like a prey animal scurrying out in the open, totally visible by any and all predators around. The increased scale also allows for really interesting set pieces. The palace and sentinel should stretch way up into the sky, and the pools of water outside it should put Olympic-sized swimming pools to shame. The portside slums in Taneth should wind round and round until you've forgotten how long you've been walking. And of course, the verticality of the game should extend to the towns as well. Now, I know that realistically, the game can't do full-sized cities. That's a thing that I know would actually suck if put into practice, but I'm not asking for full-sized cities, just something a lot bigger than those in Skyrim. I know that Vivek is kind of memed on for being too big and confusing, but honestly, that's a skill issue. I want to get lost in a city the first time I visit it. There's something really rewarding to me about being able to navigate Vivek with relatively minor difficulties. I think that it's okay to get lost. I actually quite like it. It really forces you to look around and try to engage with the world. It's almost impossible to get lost in Skyrim at all, whether you're in the city or in the wilderness, and I think that's a shame. Anyway, I think that's it. There are definitely more things I could talk about, but I think I hit all the big ones. I really do think that it's a shame that none of this will happen. Bethesda has proven at this point that they're not interested in making role playing games, let alone ones that will cater to folks like me. But what do y'all think? What do you want to see out of the game? What do you think about my ideas? Feel free to tell me what you think I'm wrong about, or right, I guess. I kind of had mixed thoughts about whether or not I actually wanted to make this into a video. The script was mostly written, so I had a place to organize my thoughts. I guess I wanted to make it a video just to try to have a conversation about what we want to see in games. Different people have different desires, and mine aren't going to be the same as yours. I guess I just wanted to start a small conversation.